All right, we're back, and it looks I might have some good news. We might be able to get this thing done. It's COMP308, and it's winter 2017, week 9, part 2 of our broadcast. And we're still talking about Angular, and we just finished talking about making an API, JSON API, a RESTful API that can be consumed by Angular. Now, in order for us to get that done, we need to affect some changes to our code. Remember that we need to use HTTP service. We're going to start off with doing things a little different. And the first thing that I want you guys to do is inside of our client code, okay? Because we're going to start with the client code. In our app folder, we're going to create another section for our games, right? So client, click on clients, right-click, new folder. And we're going to add in the games folder. We're going to do a lot of work in here. So let's get to it. All right, so in our games folder, what I want to do is I'm going to have several files. I'm going to have a services file. I'm going to have a routes file. I'm going to have a modules file. I'm going to have a components file. All right, so that means that there's 4 different files multiplied by 3. That means there's going to be 12 files that are going to be modified here because of the of TypeScript and everything else. Okay, let's get to this. So I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to start off. Again, if you think about the first file that I can have, right? In order for me to have my modules, actually, let me go back here. If you go back to the app file itself, right? By the way, this client, it can't be games like this. Like say I got games out here. Games got to be inside of my app folder, okay? So it's app games. Please put that there. But if I look at my app components for a second, notice that the component stands alone, right? The only thing it does is it inherits from Angular core. So this is this part here. When I import, I add this module, Angular core, to this file, right? And so that's probably the first step that I need to do. So in my games, right, I'm going to add a new file, and we're going to make a component for the first file, right? Which is going to be my game component.ts. So that's the first thing I'd like you to add, okay? But we're going to have some stuff that's missing. Game. So is it games.component, games component, right? .ts. Just like before, I'm going to import, right, component, right, from Angular. Come on, Angular /core. Okay, that's the first part. Next, I'm going to import. This is something I need to do. My game service. I don't have that yet. My game service has to be imported, right, from, I don't have this either, /games.service. I don't have that yet, but I need to get this game service going. So this thing is my service. I need to import my game service, but I need to control, create it first, right? Next, just like I did before, once I import component, I can use it as a decorator. So at component, and if you did that lab from last week at all, hopefully you did, then you'll have an idea of what this looks like. I need to make a custom selector, right? That's called games for now. We're going to change this later. And I'm going to put a template in here that's going to be a little different than what you've seen before. We're going to use router-outlet. Router-outlet. And we're going to close that run off. So router-outlet. Outlet. I'll be okay. So what this router outlet is, it's not a template, right? It's actually a way of us adding in subcomponents. So I want you to think of it this way. Our selector games, so it's going to be the games select. It looks like a games tag in HTML, custom tag, right? Inside the games tag, what's actually happening is the template that I'm using is coming from a subcomponent, right? Subcomponent. And that subcomponent is going to be the list subcomponent because I want to do a games list. That's what I want to do, okay? That's the template. And then finally, we need to specify providers, right? My providers, which is the game service, right? Which we don't have that yet. That's our provider. So you should only have one error at the end afterwards, That's up here. This one is not an error because we need to export our class, which is called games component. Remember, we're just creating up our games component. And my games component right now has a game selector. That's all you know. Okay, we're going to get to this other stuff in a bit. Are you with me so far? Again, I'm adding another 3 files like this. So please keep with me so you understand the process that's involved. So first, again, so far, we've installed our API, our JSON API. That's what we've done. Okay? Once we've got our JSON API, like that's number 1, right? Then I can do the other stuff. Okay, next piece. Next piece. I want to install that service. So I'm going to right-click here and a new file, and I'm going to say games.service, right, .ts. All right, now this is what we were talking about. I'm going to import, and this is neat, this rxjs/rx, right? This is the reactive programming library that I'm basically attaching, right? And then what I'm going to say is I'm going to import something called an observable. Remember, the observable is an object of a data stream. I'm looking at an object, data stream object, from the rxjs/observable library. That's what I'm doing. Got to be in this order, guys. Finally, I'm going to import something called an injectable, right, from Angular core. Oh, I hate when it does that. Core. Because you need an observable, but you need to be able to inject it. So I got the observable means I'm looking at a stream. Remember, an observable is just we're observing a stream of data, and we just call it an observable, right? The observable itself is the stream of data, right? Each piece that's inside the stream are things that we're observing. We're watching the stream. We're seeing things that are being emitted, events that are being emitted. For example, data events, or completion events, or error events. Or we're looking at that observable, that object, and seeing those things. And then we're using the injectable from Angular to inject whatever we see or we get from the observable into our code. We're also going to import, again, our HTTP service, right? As well as headers, right? Our request method, our response method, right? Our response. And we're going to do that, of course, from Angular HTTP. By the way, because we did not include HTTP, the HTTP module, inside of our app.module yet, if we try to do it here and just now like this, it would fail because we've never injected it into our manifest, right? The entire app must have all of the methods and modules we need from the bootstrapping point, right? If we don't do it then, it won't work. All right, so this is all coming from Angular, all this stuff here. This is all the Angular modules we need for our observable. Next, we're going to mark something as injectable. Here's our injectable, right? And we're going to say export our class called game service, right? Or game service, the service is just a class. We're going to have a private base URL, which is going to be API, right? Makes sense? Because remember, our base URL was API. And then we're going to do our constructor, which we're going to pass in another private HTTP object, which is HTTP. Passing in the HTTP service, basically. Okay, that's all we're doing with the constructor. So now we have it. Whenever we do this, this right here is a shortcut to say, declare an instance variable of type that you want to call HTTP, _HTTP, just like this. and then inject the HTTP service into the constructor and assign it as a reference to this object, HTTP. That's what we're doing. All right, so these are our instance variables. And just like any other class, this is our constructor. Right? All right, now we continue. We're still inside the class. We're going to make the list method. The list method is going to return something. It's going to return an observable. We're going to cast as any. We don't know what it's going to be. Some kind of object that we're watching. So in order for me to complete this, I need to return this._HTTP, right? And we're going to use, kind of like a promise, we're going to use the get method, which is we're going to get the base URL, okay? The list, and we're going to map out, we're going to create a relation between the list and the response object, right? Where we're going to return, the response is we're going to return a JSON object that we're going to get from the HTTP, the observable, basically. We're going to return any kind of error we're going to get in a custom error handler. Now notice that we're going to get an error here. We're getting an error because we don't have this error handler available to us. We're going to do it now. We're going to create it. You know what, Jonathan, I'm going to expect you to know this on the next assignment. No, sorry. Handle error. And here's our custom error handler, where we're going to return an observable, and we're going to throw an error.json with a message, or if there's no error message, we're going to return something like server error. If somehow we don't get a message. So sometimes that can happen. But again, these are our methods, right? So it's just like class, like we've seen before. Methods, right? We defined a class, and it's injectable. This whole class is injectable, this game service. I'll leave it up here like this so you guys can see it. That's what it looks like. So the base URL, the reason why we're defining the base URL as API is because that's what we decided was going to be. Whenever we put API, that's the base URL. That's the kind of part of a path that we're going to be using. All right? And we're actually injecting this inside of our games component. Remember we talked about the games component that's listening for this game service? That's what this thing is. Are we good? Down? How's that? Up? It's just the semicolons, right? I mean the curly braces. That's all it is. Okay, so that's really what the inject. So this thing here, this service is just this stuff. Now I'm going to make it a little bit smaller for you guys, so maybe you can see it all. Well, this is what it looks like right now, approximately. Okay. All right, so without the service, now sometimes this is also called a factory in the old version of AngularJS. AngularJS 1, AngularJS 1.5, this is called a factory or a service, both ways. And the service, what it does is it uses the HTTP service, right? Because we're consuming a RESTful API through HTTP. We're actually looking at the website, right? And through HTTP, that port, we're going to grab the data, use it as an observable, so it's going to become an object. We're going to observe different parts of the data, and as we get the data, we're going to use it and load it in. That's what we're doing here. Okay, that's all you have to know how it works. I don't expect you to remember how to do this. Okay, next. Once we've got this thing going on, right, we have our games component. We've got our service, right? We need routes, right? That's the next piece. So I'm going to add that in. So I'm going to right-click on our file here. I'm going to add a new file called games.routes.ts. Again, TS is for TypeScript. M is for murder. Okay. So games.routes.ts. There we go. So now this requires us to do a couple things. Now we're going to not be able to complete this right now, but we're going to start it. This is how it looks like. Import routes. I'll make it bigger so you can see it now again. Import routes from @Angular router. Import. Remember we had our games component. We have that now still. Games component. We have to consume this, right? From /games dot component. I did it wrong. Like I did it wrong. Let's put a /. Semicolon. So this is our route. This is our games component. We're including those two things. And then I need to also include subcomponents. So include subcomponents here. I don't have them right now. One of them is going to be the list component that I'm going to use, because I'm going to use that list component with a special list tag that's going to be inside of my object. Okay. I don't have that, but I'm going to leave a space for it. This is just my my pseudocode, right? And then I'm going to export games roots, which is of type roots, to be equal to an array of objects. Oops. Array of objects is our path, where the path, right, is equal to API. Actually, is it API? Yeah, API. The path is API. My component is my games component. And I have some children on this path. We'll talk about what those children are in a second, which is an array of objects where they have a path of, in this particular case, the first one is games. And the component is called something called list component. Now, we don't have this list component here. And we need to get it, right? We haven't defined a list component yet. This is the list path, right? So whenever I go API games, remember I showed you that path, I get a list of games. That's what I want, right? Here's what the component's going to look like. We don't have it yet, but we're going to have to get it. It looks like this. I'm going to have to import list component, right? From /. We're going to make a list folder. Into the list folder, we're going to have list.component. It's going to turn up red right now because we don't have that yet. You see, that's a dependency. So this is our routes file, right? Our routes file basically says, here are a bunch of routes, right, for Angular. This is how Angular does its routing, okay? So I'm going to list all of the routes that are specific for this component, right? So I might have my list. I'm going to have my delete. I'm going to have my update, right? Those are the things I'm going to have, right? And my create. So create, read, update, delete. I'm going to have all those things. My read is this one. This is my read, right? Because my list, I'm doing a list. I'm reading from the database, right? And I'm going to get that information from API games. API is my API, my soft API where I'm getting stuff. Games is the path that I'm using to get. And I'm injecting my component that I'm using for that one is list component, which I'm using right up here. I just haven't defined it yet. Are you good? Let's move on. Okay, so this is my list component. Now we've done 3 out of the 4, right? I have one more to do. I have my routes. I have my component. I have my service, and now I have to do my module. So new file, games.module.ts. Now this is where it becomes really hairy. It's the same as like the app module. We're going to still do, this is a bunch of imports we're going to do, right? So import ng module, right, from at Angular core. So we're going to get our, oh, damn. There we go. And then import common module. There's something new we have to change from our Angular / common, as well as import forms module from Angular / forms, and then import our router module from at Angular / router. Now you might say, well, do I need to call them that? I need to call this router module. Can I? What if I wanted to call it router module 2? Could I do that? Well, no, because router module 2 does not exist. It looks physically inside that folder to find out which of the modules you're connecting to. Think about the modules as classes. I've got several classes that are defined inside this this router component, router plugin, and I'm basically attaching them to my file. So again, Angular is component based, right? So these are all the Angular requirements. Angular requirements, right, to complete my module. Then I have my own. This is like these are the games requirements, right? Or the you know, kind of core module requirements. In this case, because it's games, I'm saying games requirements, but it's actually import by games roots, right? And again, this is coming from /games roots. See how it comes up? And I'm also going to import my games component, and it's from /games component. Give me good code hinting there. Import, and then finally, now this is what we're missing. Our list component, we don't have that, right? From /list.component. We don't have that, that's why it's red. These are our game module requirements. And this one is our subcomponents. We can have more than one. Right now, we only have one. We're going to have other ones. Create, delete, update, whatever you want. All right, now that we have our components, these are our requirements we've listed down here. We've attached everything to our file. Remember, this is our manifest. That's how we're going to load up our file. Then we have ng module, where we're going to say something like this. We're going to attach the common module. Right? So if I start typing common module, actually I'm totally wrong. I meant imports. I'll be okay. And inside there, we're going to go common module. I was looking at why I'm getting code hinting. And also, I want the forms module and also the router module, but notice that the router module is not just the router module by itself, but we also have to specify for child. And for child in this case, we're going to say it's going to be games roots. So for child games roots, we're attaching the router. Because games roots, right, this one here, is where all the routing is being done. It's actually showing us a list or a bunch of objects that are representing the routes. So that's our import. Now we're also going to do our declarations. So here's our declarations. Where again, in our declarations, we're going to have a games component and our list component. And that's it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to export our class called games module. This is not complete, right? Oh, and why is this giving me an error? Declarations, because I didn't spell it right. That's what it looks like so far. Everyone good? Get the top part. Here, I'll make it a little smaller for you guys if you want. Yeah, this part. We good? So what we've done so far, we've created 3 modules for our games. Now this is all set up. This is all set up for us to get all this stuff done that we want to get done, right? So again, first we set up our the stuff we have to do with our HTTP service. You know, again, we set up that. We set up the routes. We set up the components, and we haven't really touched the app itself. We're going to touch that too. We're going to add some other things on the outside. This is just the module, the little games module we've added in to deal with our games collection, right? Now you can have one of these modules for every section you want. You can have one for users. You can have one for, I don't know, other kinds of things, categories. Maybe you're going to have one for ratings. You can have one for posts or articles. You can have one for whatever you want, right? Each one is going to have their own routing and their own templating and their own, everything else is going to be their own. Are we good? Can I move on? Was that? Are we waiting for him? Let's check to see if we have any errors anywhere else. We've only got this one list component error, but that's because we haven't listed the list component, right? So the games component looks like it's okay. The game routes now still we need this list component for game routes. Game modules needs a list component, right? Game service looks like we're okay in game service. So list component is the next one. And you know you're going to make it inside of your games folder. So we're going to make another folder inside the games folder called list. This is the name of my method, but it's also going to be the place that I'm going to keep the template for that I'm going to spit out the list inside. All right. Think about this as a micro partial file. Think about that, whatever you want to call it. A little part of the whole. All right. That I'm going to use. It's not like as big as a partial. It's kind of a partial. It could be very large too. It could be a template that's, you know, pages long as well. But typically you don't have to make it that big. All right, so in my list, I want to have 2 files. Actually, there's going to be 3, right? But for now, let's add in the first one. My new file is going to be my list.component.ts. List.component.ts. Now, this is inside of the list folder, inside the games folder, which is inside the app folder. Several levels deep here. Here's my list component. I'm going to import. Whenever we do a component, we must import from component, which is inside the, make this a little bigger so you guys can see it as I'm typing, and I'll kill this part so you can see it much larger, which is coming from Angular at Angular core, right? I'll always do that. And then we're also going to get a reference to the games service. So we can't do it without the game service, that's for sure. Where we're looking at up one level into the games service folder or file. This is our component. We're defining a stock component. We're getting it from Angular, and then we're actually making a reference to our game service. Good. Now, here we go. At component. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create the component. Now remember, components require a selector, right? Where we have, in this particular case, it's going to be called list, and a template URL, this one, which we're going to go app/games, right? /list/list.template, which we don't have yet, template.html. Why is that? Why am I giving this absolute list? Because I'm down a bunch of levels, right? I'm right inside the app games list template, no HTML. But I'm starting here because it's relative path. I go up to app and then come down from here. This is where I can find myself. Otherwise, I'm going to screw myself up in terms of pathing, which is not what I want. Next, export a class, which is called list component. Inside my list component class, I'm going to have games. In this particular case, we're going to modify this, which we have type any, an error message, right? Which is going to be a type of string. And then inside of a constructor function, we're going to listen for a private underscore games service, right? We're going to get from game service. So we're going to get a reference to our game service from the game service that's coming into our app. So that's the reference. Now, here is the event. So this is right here on the top here. These are our instance variables. Right? This is our constructor. Method, constructor method, we'll say. We'll take constructor function, but actually it's a method. And underneath that, we're going to have our methods. Just like any class. You've seen these kind of structures before, right? We're going to say ng, that stands for Angular, on init when Angular starts, right? When Angular provides an initialization, right? We're going to say this dot underscore game service, right? Dot list game service. List is the method that we defined, right? We're going to subscribe to the list. There's our subscribing. And we're going to pass in a reference to games, right? Which is this dot games, which is this one up here, is equal to games. The games that we're getting from our service. So games, this games, is going to be the object representing what we're getting in from the JSON stream. Now, is this accurate? Because remember, we're not just getting games. We're getting games. We're getting who's logged in. We're getting the title of our file, and that means we're getting more information. In fact, if anything, we're getting our games component, our reference to our games component itself, which includes all those things. But it's also our games page, whatever the games page is, right? So that's what this is, our games page data or games data or page data. We'll call it whatever you like. That's more accurate than games. We're going to change that later. For now, I want you to, we'll see it like this, get it working. That's what I want to do, like I did with Aaron earlier. Hopefully we can do that still. And then after we get it working, we'll rename and recontext everything. Because right now you want to get it just going. Are we good? Okay. So we got our list component, but we need this other thing. We need this app games list.template.html because we need to have this. So I'm going to go back out on our list, right click, new file. And what I want to do here is I want to call this list.template.html. Can I have a CSS if I wanted? Absolutely. Do I want to do that right now? No, I don't, right? And what I want to do here is I want to put an h1 tag. And h1 inside the h1 tag, I want to put the name games for now, just so we can see that we're there. I want to have a UL, and inside that I want to have a list item. And in the list item, I want to just show, right, my game dot games, sorry, games, it's going to be games, right? Because we call the games dot title. Title. Why title? Because that's not really our games title. Remember, games is not what we're getting. We're getting a page data, and we're getting the title, and we're getting the display name, and we're getting the games dot cost and games dot whatever, and it would be totally different. Okay. So we're going to just get, all I want is the title of the game. That's it. That's all I want. It's a very simple template. If I can get this, I can rule the world, right, with my data. With my data. I'm not Trump, okay? And it's becoming a bad word to say Trump. Okay. So are we good? That's what all this thing does. This, and if I can access it, we're good to go. Now, we're not done. Let's keep checking to see if we've got connectivity. So here, we're good. There's no errors. Here, now, there's no errors. We've fulfilled this request. Right here, there's no errors. Here, there's no errors, right? No errors, not at all. Okay, now that we've done this piece, we need to do the next piece. So this is the games section, okay? That's not the end, because we have to reconfigure or revisit, call it whatever you like. We have to revisit the app stuff because these app components have to be updated with the new requirements, which is I need to inject an HTTP service and a forms module and a bunch of other things. So inside my app folder, right, I have my app.component. That is okay. Let's leave that alone. But I also have my app.module, and that's what we have to change. So if I go app.module, again, I'm looking inside the app, so client app, and then app.module.ts. Now, there's stuff that's missing, and we're going to get to fix this in a second. But I want to show you how it doesn't work at the beginning. All right, so we've got this part here is the requirements for Angular. So this is our Angular requirements, right? And this part is going to be our components. We have more than one. We only have one right now called app component. Like our main component, our driver. And we need to make a reference to the forms module, which we're coming from the @Angular and then forms, I believe. And then import also our router module, right, from @Angular/router. And last, I think we're going to also import the HTTP module, right, with request options. Okay. We're getting from the Angular/HTTP service. Those are the new things we have to put in, right? We have to add them on the app side as well because this is our driver for the entire application, right? So our driver, we're calling these requirements and we're injecting them as dependencies, right? We're saying right now, only the browser module was a dependency, but now we're going to add a bunch of other ones. Let's add the rest. So we're going to add browser module, we're going to add HTTP module, we're going to also add in the forms module, and then we're going to do the games module. Games module. I have that? I didn't add that. Oh, so here's our games module, right? We have to add a couple things. We did our app component, but we also have to add that module. So our custom modules, right? We have more. Maybe we have more than one, not ng modules. Modules might have more than one, right? So in this case, I have only one. So we're going to just go fix this up. We're going to say the games module itself, right, is coming from our /games/games module, right? And so we've made that connection now. Before it was not connected to our main app, right? Think about this main app as our index.html to the rest of the app, right? Now that we have this games module, I can include it down in here, games module. And also, what we're going to just make it bigger so you can see everything. We're also going to include our router module. Those are the things we added up here. We had router, browser, all these things got just added in here as dependencies. We import them, and then we say these are the ones we're importing. We're getting them from all the ones that we've listed at the top here. Our declarations are app component. That's not going to change. And by bootstrapping app component. Bootstrapping means this is the first area that we're going to start with, app component. Now, we are missing something here. We're missing app roots because we haven't defined them yet. So we're going to say, so we got roots for our game module, but now we also need app roots. And the way app roots is, this is our router, app roots. We don't have it yet, but we will make it from /app.roots. We don't have this yet, so that's kind of red for us right now. This is our roots, our generic roots for the entire application. From an Angular perspective, how it handles them. Are we going to have a lot of them? No, because we're using express routing to get us here. We're only going to use the module routes, but we need to have app routing enabled from an app perspective. Because remember, Angular does not need routing, right? Angular is a framework that can stand on its own. It doesn't need an express backend. Sometimes we can set up Angular with the front end, and then the back end can be something like PHP, right? Or maybe it's going to be some other service, right? But we don't need to. We can make it as the back end can be just strictly HTTP, like a regular, I don't know, Apache server with no data whatsoever if you don't want. It doesn't have to be on a node server or something else, right? Okay. So we've done this piece. Again, there's errors, there's problems. We're going to we're going to adjust these problems together. So this piece is completed. Let's go into the piece we're missing, which is my app routes. My app routes. Okay, so it's a very simple one. I'm going to right-click on app, new file, and we're going to say app.routes.ps. Again, we're going to import our routes from the Angular router, I think it is. That's where it is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to export, just like we did before, with as a constant, app routes, which is of type routes, which is equal to an array of objects. An array of objects where the first object is a path. Okay, and the one is we're going to also redirect to // which is basically we're saying to the router, we're not going to really use routing, we're just going to pass it through. Think about this as pass-through routing. Why? Because we're not using routing from this perspective. Only routing the module, the game module. The rest we're not doing anything at all with. This wouldn't be the case. If we're actually going to do app routes, it wouldn't look like this typically. Are we good? Small module, small stuff, right? I'll pull all this architecture up in a bit on GitHub so you can compare. All right. Oof. Lots of insanity, right? Lots of insanity. But incorrect, my friends. Incorrect. There's some minor issues we got to correct. One of them is our games module. Our games module has a problem, right? I'm going to correct it now. So in my games module, we import stuff, we declare everything, but we don't export anything. And what we need to do here at the bottom is we need to do exports. And we need to declare what we're going to export, right? We're going to export putting this out there, games component. If we don't export our games component, we can do whatever we want with it. We need to export it so we have access to it outside of the module. Remember, a games component also includes the list component as subcomponent. So the games component is packed full. It'll have a bunch of subcomponents that we're going to access later on, right, as different templates, right, with their own classes, right? So that's the first change. Second change, right? In our, we got this already? All I did was added this exports inside of our games module.ts. Second change is inside of the app module, right? Our app module. Are you good? We have this router module, right? But just like we did the router module in our games module, notice the games module, games module, we had a router module for child, game roots. When you do the same thing, we're missing the root of our module for the app, right? So just when I went to my app module.ts, there it is. And you can't see it. It's way over here. I'm just going to pull these ones down here so you can see it on a different line. And it's router module dot for root, right? And then we're going to specify app roots. That's important. So we're going to take app roots and use that as the router. We're going to we use that as the router module. Basically, we're injecting this in as a dependency. Those are the two. Are you with me? Wow, lots of changes, right? But we don't know if any of this works. We made a bunch of stuff happen right away, but unfortunately, we can't test it individually. It's like one depends on another, which depends on another. It's like I've broken up my file. Maybe I would have had a long file. And you could do this, by the way. See how this is done? You don't have to do it this way. You could break it out so you do all your components and everything on one big long page for Angular. I don't recommend it. But here we've broken out Angular into each of its own paces, and they tell you how to do that from the very beginning, which is a good practice. But you don't have to. You can have all these imports and all the other stuff down here all on one page, right? All of them, like multiple classes and everything else, right? But it doesn't make any sense. All right, so let's test this out. So we've made 22 files. We've added. We're still running this part. It looks like it's not running yet. So let me just run it with NodeMon. Looks like it started, and we're going to go back up here, and let's test to see if the functionality that we had before is still there. So localhost 3000, and now we've got an issue. Right, and this is what I was talking about before, right? There's nothing wrong here. What we have to do is just have to delve into this, why it's happening the way it's happening. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to go inspect first. And we're going to see what we're going to get. Actually, it tells us a lot of the information ahead of time. If I go to console, it says, unhandled promise rejection, no base href set. Well, we have set the base href. Remember, we put it at the top of our header, inside that partial file. Okay, but we're dealing with asynchronous programming. And even though we put it at the top of our file, sometimes it doesn't get added in, because we're using two different view engines, right? And that might be the cause. So to fix this, there is a base href that we can add in the common module, okay? Now, I don't have the fix, but I think it was put up on Slack earlier today. And if you look at this, our friend here, she put it up here. And if you look at what it says, if you scroll down, it shows us that inside of our router config, and I know this is all the craziness that goes on, right? When we look at this stuff, there's a couple of fixes. So this is no base href set. If you scroll down, there is this import for RC6, release candidate 6. Now we're beyond that, so we're good. Take this, copy it. It's right inside of our Slack, right? If you go to the link. And I'm going to go back to here, right? And I'm going to look at our app module. And at the bottom, underneath HTTP module request options, I'm going to populate that import, app base href. Okay? I'll talk about what this is again. Remember what this is. It's inside of our our header, right? Where base href is equal to /, right? So this is the first part. And then down in here, right? Just like she has imports, we also have something called providers. And we're going to take this line here, which is something we're missing. And under imports and before declarations, we're going to put providers. By the way, the order doesn't matter. I like to put Bootstrap at the bottom. Right, so that is AP app base href, and then use the value /. This is like, I'm going to show you the, I'm going to go back and show you from a server perspective. We had this partial for the header. Remember we did this? We did this last week. So it's already set, but it's asynchronous, and sometimes it doesn't work out. It doesn't load properly. So again, I'm going to go back to show you that again, so we have everything. Everyone's on the same page. So app module.ts, this is where I put that in. Full root was one of the things that changed. Base app base href, we added that in to here and to there in order for us to have the base href, base link basically, base path loaded into our files, into our project. I'm transpiling, I'm saving. And now let's check it out again. So I've got a problem. And do I still have a problem? I do. Okay, this is something new. All right, unhandled promise, rejection. Invalid configuration of root API / games. Path cannot start with /. Well, this is easy to fix. This is totally easy to fix if you got this, right? Are you here with me? You got this problem? If you got this problem, you're good. You're golden because we're going to fix it. Remember I talked about problems of the book? Yeah, baby. No problems is a bad thing. No problems is a bad thing. If I got a problem, you don't. That's something different, right? So, if you look at app routes, right, you see API and then / games. You don't need to put the / in there. It just needs to be like this. This is in the games.roots.ts file. Oof, man, it's craziness, eh? Like all this to use Angular for the front end. I've already done it, but we're doing it again.
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Well, you know, the great thing about Angular is it gives two-way data binding and all this other stuff it does, right? So it's a dynamic, modern approach to front-end framework, right? So let's try this again. So let's again, I've saved everything. I'm going back out here. Does it fix my problem? You know, maybe it does. Hello, Angular. This is a good sign. I love this sign. Now, we have not tested our games, right? We've only done Hello Angular, which just does our app component. So we know from that perspective, everything is working. In order for me to test further, I need to put in that new tag inside of my app. Now, let me show you what happens if I don't. So if I go into my content index.ejs where I have this my app tag, and I take it out. I'm just going to take it out for a second. So take it out. Save. Come back and refresh. It's going to break. It's going to break because I'm telling it to expect Angular here, right? Because I've attached the framework, it's listening from my app. If I don't attach my app now, right, it's going to complain that it doesn't exist. So I got to put it back in. Let's go back. So I'm going to put it back in. And this time, not only do I want to attach my app, but I also want to put in games. So what should I see? I've got my games, which is a games list, and I've got my app on the outside, right? What should I see when I come to this? And if I've done everything correct, I should see Hello Angular and something else, but I'm not. I'm seeing empty. Why am I seeing empty? Because of where I'm going. I'm not seeing anything actually, which is a bad thing, right? How do I know this? Okay, because I've injected my games, right, inside of my app. Remember what games is. If I go back in my games component is the games custom selector. I'm using router outlet for us to test this, just to see that I'm correct, that I'm getting here. If I take this template and change it, right, to something that looks like this, H1. Oh. Now let's put in games, right? Just to prove that it's there. Save. So anytime I inject the game selector, I get this. I don't get any data, but I get this, right? That's the data is the next step, all right? So I've come to there and I'm refreshing. And if I did everything correctly, then I should get games. How come I'm not? What's going on? What's actually going on here? Well, one of the problems that I have is that I'm not really getting anything because I'm trying to get to my games page, right? But my routing is all wrong. I'm hitting //, right? And I'm trying to see this over here. So that might be the issue. I'm not getting any errors down here, which is really good. On the back end also, reactive.js, right, RxJS, is actually looking at my observable. And I'm getting a 200 for my games component. You can see that I'm getting there. Here's my 200, right? Then I'm hitting my service.js, but it never really goes to anywhere else. That's why this is really good to look at, right? To understand, like looking for your 200s, right? I'm seeing a lot of 304s. 304 is just no change. That's what they mean, right? So I'm seeing a lot of 304s. They say no change. Oh, there's a 200. There's my games component for the last time, right? Okay, cool, cool. Let me go back to that. And I want to see this thing, right? Is it route dependent? Okay. Let's check this out. So I'm going to go back to my my drawing board here. I'm going to go back to down here to the views, right? It's my views. And instead of going to content, I'm going to go to games. I'm going to go to index my games in here, right? So here's my index. And what I'm going to do is after I've done all this stuff, all these games, and after the table, below the table, right? There's my table. And if I look at, there's a div tag above the table. So the div tag above the table is column medium offset 3, this one. So there's 3 div tags, the table, and then 3 div tags, right? So below the table, I'm going to do my dash app, right? I can put this anywhere, right? And inside my app, I'm going to put games with a different route. Okay, so save. And I'm going to refresh, make sure this works still. Yes, it does. I'm going to log in to my games. And if I did everything correctly, I should see games down here. How come I don't see it in this case? I don't even see like hello world or whatever. I don't see it. It's not asking for it because I didn't add to the bottom of this one. I've got a header component. I've got a footer, but I don't have Angular. So I got to add that in. So include partials angular.ejs. I refresh now. It's going to check to see what I'm going to get. Where it says Angular is running on this page. And I go hello Angular, but I got no games. Games not coming up. That's a bad thing. But this is good. The reason why I'm showing you, you can inject that my app anywhere you like. Is anyone getting anything different? Is anyone getting any games or anything else? I don't see anything in there, right? Because in my injectable, right, I should see right now, because I'm not even going anywhere. If you look at this, right? So if I look at my games component, my game module, in order for me to get to my games module, and I'm going to check this out in a second, why this is not working, right? I'm going to go through it because I have another example, right? I'm going to load my games component. Here's my games component, right? Where I get my game services. But my template is very simple. My selector's games, and I just want to print out games. That's all I'm going to do, right? And this is going to be inside my app. Inside my app. Okay? So my app, what is it doing for me, right? I'm showing this so you can see it, right? If I go to my app, this is app.module.ts. It loads the app component, and app component goes to this URL, right? My URL. How can I inject my app inside something else when it doesn't add to it, right? So let me take a look here what my app looks like. So my template URL, again, just to show you this, is app.template.html. That's all it is. How can I inject that in there? How about I add it in here? So if I go games, if I do that in there, that means everything has a game component. That means I'm going to go back to where I put it down here in my index.html, take it out of here. And same thing goes with this one. Now, there's a way of, we're trying to figure out how this is all used, right? There we go. Take it out of there and there. And if I refresh, it's going to jump my page. Welcome and games, right? Okay. So that means that I've got to inject it somehow. It's not that games.tag, the games tag, is not being injected somehow into my component. But I'm getting this response, which means it's going to the games part. Now that I know it's going to the games part, I'm getting this part. I'm getting a response from this one here, and I'm also probably going to get it here, right at the bottom when I get here. Whether it's here or here, it doesn't really matter, right? That means I'm getting access to this information. Okay, next, I got to go one step further and get a list of my games. So how do I do that? I'm going to go back to my games, that component. Yes, instead of doing this, I'm just going to undo this one, and then kind of put this back into play. For my router dash outlet, it's working. My subcomponent now is what I want to do, right? File, save all. And if I did this right, and if I refresh, I get welcome home Angular, hello Angular, right? Nothing here. If I go log in, I'll log in. Now I'm not getting anything again. I'm pointing this out because we're starting to trace our problem. I'm starting to trace my problem. I want to get games, right? And I'm getting right to that app component. But that app component isn't producing anything. Okay. Now we already showed you how to do that, right? So I've got my component, and if I go to my app component, right? So for each component, I've got a subcomponent. Here's my subcomponent, right? There we go. And my game service and my component is here and whatever. And I make my list component. And then basically what I'm doing is I'm using this observable, right, to get a list. Now this is incorrect because sometimes what I'll get is from this list, if I go to game service list, by the way, when I go here, and I want to do something else. I want to do a console log. When I come here, console.log, and we're going to say we're in the list component. List component. Okay. I'll put in a bunch of lines in here. So whenever we watch, I'm going to put some lines in here. So see if we're in there. And we're going to also do the same thing. This is inside of our object. We're going to do the same thing with our games component. Our games component, which is out here. So inside of our, our games. Yeah, we could probably do it in here too. So I'll probably just in here. What I can do is I can use a constructor. Is the empty constructor, and inside my empty constructor, when it comes to this, where it goes games, I'm going to do a console log. Let's say games. And let me just change that other one so we're in the same spot for the lists. So list component. Kind of go in here and go this. All right, let's just refresh. Okay, good. So let's take a look at the console. Now the console we're talking about is this console. So here we can see that we're already in games. We made it here, but we never made it to lists. The list part, we didn't make it to at all.
Is list in the same, should it be inside games or the same level as games folder?
Oh, I'm just showing you what the problems are, right? So hold on a second. Let's go into login. We'll log in here, right? And then we see games, right? I don't care what's in here now. We're not going to see the list because games isn't here, right? List doesn't get there somehow. List isn't even being called, right? So going back to the drawing board again, if I go to my list component, this is good. I mean, I'm still getting my constructor, but my constructor is never being called, right? Yeah. Where? Oh, this? Oh, that's not really important. But thank you for that. No, that's not it. But let's, just to show you that that's not true, if I refresh, I'm hoping you're right. If that was the only problem, ooh, we'd be happy, right? But that's not the case, right? So here's our things. We see we got our games, but we don't have lists, right? Okay. Again, nice and slow, nice and easy. We're troubleshooting, right? Why we're not getting this problem. All right, so next piece to check. So I checked this piece. That's not it. We're not even getting to lists. How about here? Are we injecting it? Here's our provider, right? Here's our games component. We're accessing our games, but we're not referencing our games list in here at all. We just have a router dash outlet, right? Let me bring this up to check. And then we'll take a short break and come back and maybe finish this thing. So again, we're looking at our games.component. Our games.component, which is inside games. My games.component. Right? And we're in here. I can show we're in games. We can move it this far. We're looking at our game service. We're doing all this stuff. Okay, cool. We've got this part. How about our game service? Did we ever go there? Like, can we prove that we've gone there? Well, let's go. Let's put another little comment in there too. So game service. Part of troubleshooting, right? So in our constructor, when we come to our constructor and we do this, we're going to say console.log. We'll say, you know, game service. Game service. All right, so let's see if we even got there. This is like really the way we do it, right? When we troubleshoot. If we can get information, get as much information as we can, right? Okay, so we got games, a login, access, got games. We never went to our service, ever. That's it. That's the problem. We don't go to the service, no data. But we haven't gone to the data because we never got access, asked to get to the data, because even though we made our service, we never asked for it. Again, going back to troubleshoot. How about our games module? Is there any place that we're calling the list? So we're importing this stuff. We're declaring this stuff, right? We're exporting this stuff. What about this stuff? See what happens. All right, fresh. Okay, log in. Okay. Can I do a list? Like, can I go into my component itself and actually call the list subcomponent from the other ones? Like, for example, in my app module.ts, right? We're importing all this stuff, my games module. Do I have to be explicit to add in, other things, my subcomponents in here as well. I don't know. So if I go to my app, so first of all, my games component.ts, that's my games component. I'm tracing it. We're close. We're closer, right? Here's my games module.ts, where we're actually listing for my list component. We need to declare it and we need to export it. Okay, those are important things. But we also need to do something with on the outside. So if I go to my outside here for a second, just to check, I'm just looking at my documentation. Yeah. Again, I don't see it. That's required in here, right? Doesn't mean that it's correct or not. All right. How about in my app component.ts, which is in my template, app template.html, just like we did games, what if we did lists? I'm saying, I want to see, can I do that? Can I do a list inside my games? Am I allowed to do that? Do I have to do this way? How is it going to look for me? Because so far I've got my H1, and then I got my games, and then I got lists. Is that possible? Do I have to even do this? Will it make a difference? Okay, I got a bit of an error. That's good. I like errors. Errors tell us information. It says games, game service, list component. That's good. That's a great thing. We went round trip there. We actually accessed my game service for once. So I got to explicitly say it's that. Okay, here's the error. Exception. Error in app games list.template.html caused by cannot read property title of undefined. So I'm getting undefined. Okay, cool. I like this. This is a great thing to have, right? I'm trying to get title of undefined. I'm close. Let's go back. So this is correct. Games title, games list. Because maybe I can have more than one component. I got to list my components that I want in there, right? Okay. Let's go back out to my list template, games title, right? So that's where it's going to come out. How about in my list itself, right? When I get access to my games, games is going to come from my ng on init. This games option right here, this .games, which is this one, is going to be equal to games that I'm getting from my observable, right? Okay, I like this. So what I want to do is as soon as I get access to this, I want to show me what games is on the console. So I want to do a console log again. Oops. And inside my console log, I want to show me what I get in games. I notice it says, I don't know what you're talking about. How about this .games? That definitely will tell me what I'm going to either get an object or something. May not be what I'm looking for, but I need to get something in there. Because if this is 0, where is it looking? I mean, it's accessing now I'm going to trace back to the service again, right? My games list, I'm going to have to go through every one of these things until I trace it. Saved, refresh, log in. This is good. Oh, this is wonderful. I like when I get this. Let me log in now. Because you can't get access to the data unless I'm logged in, right? Now I'm logged in. Games list, undefined. Undefined. I'm getting an undefined error. So I'm actually not getting anything back from my service. So in my list component, that's why it's empty, because I'm not getting anything back. Make sense? Tracing. That's what this is. Game services, list component. So game service comes before the list component, and then from the list component, we're getting an undefined that's coming right inside there, right? All right, so what's wrong with my game service? Let's go to my game service. Game service.ts. Cool. Here's my game service. I'm looking at my list. That's what I'm asking for. I'm looking at the HTTP. All right, response res.json. Is it here? I'm not getting an error, right? So why, oh why, am I not getting anything back? This? Nah.
Probably not, but
No. So let me take a look at my documentation. And game service. Base URL. API. That's not right. Should be this. Why? Because API doesn't mean anything. It'd be localhost API doesn't mean, you don't get anything from localhost API. All right, let's go back out here, refresh, log in. Okay, I'm still getting an error. What am I getting? Undefined still. Okay, let's also look over here. Sometimes this tells us a story as well, right? Because this tells us our request responses. So app list component went there now. Try to map it out. Look, API, right? So let's make sure that this is still working, right? Because that would be bad. So localhost, cool. API, cool, right? Getting something back. So that's what I should be getting. Localhost API, yeah. Duh. Still didn't give you anything. No. No. Like in here you're talking about, right? Like inside my template, inside my list template. This one? No, that won't do it. No. But what it's really is like this. It's games.games. It's games.games. That's reality. That's why I told you. Remember, I told you we're gonna have an issue. This is the issue, right? And by the way, if I don't want to, if I just want to print out games, a games list, I want to show a games list, right? So I'm not even going to do this part here. But let's just leave that out. So I'm just going to cut it out and have nothing. I just want to get to this part, this list component. Okay, so no issues. So I should be able to get that, right? Because if I go here to refresh, so if I go back out to this and refresh, right, as an example, then I'm good, right? See, I don't got any errors because I went to my list component and I'm getting undefined, but I don't care, right? As soon as I put in some kind of object, because I'm getting undefined, doesn't matter what I put in here. So games.games. Name, I believe, is the name of the game, right? Because if you look at our API, this is the whole thing is considered games. Games. Inside of this object, right? Name, right? And there's an array of games that I'm getting. So even this is incorrect. Games.games 0, what it should be. Games.games 0.name. That's what it should be. But it doesn't matter what I put here because I'm getting undefined. I'm not reading anything from the path, which is one part of the problem. Right? One part of the problem is I'm not getting anything from the path. So my pathing is incorrect somehow. All right, so I go back, refresh, got this issue, right? Because I'm getting undefined. Doesn't matter. Look, if I even have to put that in there, and if I say cannot read the property of games, it's because it's undefined. I'm not getting anything back from from the server. It's empty. If I go to my list, the list itself, which is part of my my service, right? So this part, it's right in here. The problem is somewhere in here where I'm actually trying to get some kind of response or whatever. And I gotta look to see what it is. So for now, because I think we did a lot and we tried to get all this stuff going, before I check to see what the problem is, because I want to also look at some other documentation to make sure this is correct, right? So I went through this like fast and furious. Let's take a short break, please. And when we come back, I want to check this out and see what's going on. Okay? Let's do that now.